food in Africa is rice. Rice is life, and I think that in a lot of countries in the world it probably is, but in it's no different in West Africa. Rice is life. Rice is cheap. It has the nutrients that they need, and they have, of course, their own local ways of preparing it. And in Sierra Leone and Liberia, they have, you know, slightly differing recipes, but particularly in Sierra Leone, well, okay, no, in Liberia as well, they put on top of the rice, they prepare rice, they boil up the rice, prepare it, and then they put what is called plaças on top of it. Now, plaças, the best way that it was described to me by an American companion is plant sauce. Plaças is like plant sauce, and pretty much it means any type of plant that they have. What they'll do is they'll get a plant, some usually leaves of some sort, and they'll grip them in their hand, and then they'll use a knife and they'll kind of cut off the very top, and then they'll inch it up a little bit, cut off the very top again, and inch it up a little bit. So they just have this, you know, bunch of leaves, and it ends up looking kind of like if you were to take lettuce and throw it in a blender. It would just chop it up into a million little pieces. That's kind of what it ends up looking like. And they put that in a pot. They put tons of oil into it, a few different spices. There's a spice there that is really common called Maggi. It's like a kind of a bouillon kind of a spice, and they throw a bunch of that in and a whole bunch of oil, boil it up, and so it ends up becoming this sauce kind of a thing. This kind of the consistency of it would be, it's a very unique consistency, and it just goes right on top of the rice. The oil drips all down into the rice. The common oil there is palm oil, because there's a lot of palm trees there, and so they use lots and lots and lots of palm oil, and they put palm oil in this plaças, put it on the rice, and then you just eat it just like that. And there are different plants that they will use. They'll use a common one in Sierra Leone is cassava leaf. So if you don't know what cassava is, you can look it up on the internet. But it's a plant that's grown in tropical climates, and the plant basically is like I think it's like a tuber, kind of like a potato. But it's long and thin, grows underground. But what they'll do in Sierra Leone is they'll cut the leaves off of it when it's just a really young plant. You know, when it just has sprouted, they'll start harvesting the leaves off of it, and they'll use them. They'll cut them up, like I said, and put them in this plaças, which they'll put on their rice. They also use some sweet potato leaves. You know, they have local species of sweet potatoes that they'll do the same thing when the plant is young. They'll cut off the leaves and they'll put it in they'll make it into a plaças and put it on their rice. But some other common foods, and again, it's just more things that they put on their rice. You know, rice is the thing that they eat, but some other common things that they put on it is seafood. Because both Sierra Leone and Liberia are right next to the ocean, and so fishermen will go out into the ocean and they'll catch fish, and so the fish is a pretty cheap meat, and so they'll get fish and they'll cook the fish. They'll either fry the fish, or I think sometimes they might boil it, but a lot of the time is fried, and they'll just throw the entire fish in there though. They won't like, oh, I'm going to fillet this fish and pull all the bones out. No, they just throw the whole fish in there, and you get to deal with the bones, which was probably my least favorite part about the food, is just having to, deal with these fish bones that were in my food. Other common foods is, they have other things too. There's some crab that they'll sometimes throw in it, little tiny crabs, or really small shellfish that are there. In Liberia, there's a dish called palm butter. It's a palm butter, but and it's taken from palm nuts. They'll take palm nuts and they'll beat them in a giant mortar and pestle. That's one of the most common things that they use for cooking. Like a mortar and pestle that you'd think of that you can grind spices with, just times that by like 20. And it's this big, huge wooden thing with a big rod that they'll put whatever it is they want to smush and want to mash up in it, and then they'll beat it and turn it into a mush or a powder or something like that. But they'll process a lot of their foods with that, and they'll do sometimes leaves, like instead of cutting them, sometimes they'll beat them. But anyway, in Liberia, they'll do that with the palm nuts, and they end up getting like a oily, buttery kind of thing, and they'll put that on top of their rice, and that's actually pretty good. My favorite African dish, though, is fufu. Now, if I were to describe fufu to you, it's kind of like a dough. It's like a dough that is put in a bowl, and then a soup is poured over it. One of the few dishes that actually doesn't have rice in it is fufu. And it's different depending on the country that it's made in. In Sierra Leone, they'll make it using just cassava, just solely cassava, and they'll boil up the cassava so that it's nice. Cassava is like this tuber kind of a plant that grows underground. So they'll boil it up kind of like you would boil potatoes, and then make it soft, and they'll just smash it up in their mortar and pestle, and knead it, and it ends up becoming kind of like a dough. And then, like I said, they'll put soup on it, and the way you eat it is you just grab a ball of the dough and kind of dip it in the soup, or you get some, if they have some fish in there, get some fish meat on it and stick it in your mouth and swallow it down. It's the hardest thing to get over not chewing, because you don't chew. It would be pointless to chew. You just swallow it down. That's the way you eat it. In Ghana, they make it differently. And I had a lot of Ghanaian companions. That's how I got introduced to Ghanaian fufu. But in Ghana, they'll make it with cassava and plantain. They'll do the same exact thing. They'll boil up plantains and boil up cassavas and mix the two. And it ends up making the dough a little bit firmer. And that's actually my favorite, is the Ghanaian fufu. I could eat that all day. And there's a soup that they like to put with it called groundnut soup. And groundnut is ground nut, and groundnuts is what they call peanuts. I guess probably because they grow on the ground, but they call peanuts groundnuts. And so they'll make a sauce using a lot of peanuts, and so it's a kind of a peanutty soup that they'll use it. They'll sometimes eat it with rice, but a lot of time it's eaten with fufu, and that's my favorite dish. I could eat that like crazy. And like I said, at first, when you're getting used to the consistency of this food, it's different. It's different than anything I've ever had in America. But it's really good. After I think most missionaries that eat it come to really like it. The first time it's like this, wow, interesting, but it quickly grows on you, and you end up really enjoying it. I think as far as most missionaries anyway. Let me think, other foods. Oh, another part of the best part about food in Sierra Leone is the fruit. Boy, they've got fruit that we don't even have here, and they have so much of it, and it's so good. Mangoes are the first thing that come to mind. They have fresh mangoes. During mango season, just a month or so, or a couple months out of the year is when the mangoes start to ripen. And in Sierra Leone and Liberia, mango trees are like, in America we have maple and oak. They just have mangoes. Like, everyone has a mango tree in their yard. Mango trees are all over the mountains. Mango trees are all over the sides of the road. And so mangoes, during mango season, the whole entire country just gets covered in mangoes. And they're you get them straight off of the tree, and they're fresh and they're ripe, and it's unlike it's hard to find mangoes in a supermarket here in the United States that taste that good, that are that fresh and that ripe. Missionaries like to indulge on mangoes a little bit during mango season, but it's fantastic. Another thing is coconut. Coconut is one thing that's available all year round. That's one thing that doesn't seem to really have a season. And what they'll do with coconut is they'll pull it straight off of the tree, usually when it's pretty young, and it doesn't actually have a hard shell on it, like you would think of coconut here in the store. It doesn't have a hard shell on it. It just has like a green husk, and inside the green husk is milk. And if the coconut is picked early enough, then the meat inside the coconut that normally you would think of as being hard is not. It's kind of like a jelly kind of thing. And I think it tastes way better than hard coconut, personally. But they'll sell it on the street. They'll get wheelbarrows, and they'll fill the wheelbarrow full of coconut, and they'll walk around the street, and you can buy them for very, very cheap and enjoy fresh coconut milk as you're out walking around. They call it coconut water, but whatever. But that's delicious as well. They have bananas all year round, and they have pineapple all year round. They also grow a couple other things. I mean, they have cucumbers. They have some native fruits that you don't see as much around here. One called soursop, SOURSOP. You can look it up. It's a pretty good fruit. One that they call monkey apples. I have yet to translate that into what the real name for it is. They have star fruit. In Sierra Leone, they call it five-finger apple because it's a fruit that's shaped kind of like a star. Like if you were to cut it in half, it would be a star on the inside, and it tastes very similar to an apple. That's really good. But as far as a lot of the other vegetables that we have that grow that we can get in the supermarket, not a ton. You can find occasionally. You can find carrots. Maybe you can find potatoes. You can find sweet potatoes there very commonly. Sweet potatoes is way more common than just a normal, like a russet potato that you would find in the store here. But the sweet potatoes there are really good. It's a different species of sweet potato that's kind of purplish on the inside. So good. A lot of people will fry them up and sell them on the side of the road. Kind of like, not quite like potato chips, but more just like French fries. Kind of like French fries, but they just cut them up into chunks, fry them, sell them on the side of the street.